It's, yeah, I'm John DELANEY. I'm 85. We're living in Catskill, New York. It's so beautiful here. We feel very lucky, to be here. Very grateful every day that our lives have woven together now in Catskill for many years, and we hope for more years, many more. And of course, I'm lucky beyond words to be with Pat for so many years now. She has struggled with some modest success to make me a human being rather than a beast from the deep. And it's all due, whatever measure, modest as it is, being a human being, I attribute to Pat and her struggle. Teach me how to eat well, exercise, act well, and try to be a human being. That constant aspiration. I was lucky in life, so lucky. The best luck may have been to have a loving mother. A loving mother gives you a basic assurance in life. A loving father doesn't hurt either. But my mother was enabled to, by home relief. We were poorer than church mice. It was the Depression. I was born in 1932. One historian argues it was the worst year in the Depression. 25% official unemployment. The actual employment is always, of course, much higher. But because of home relief, initiated by then Governor Roosevelt, elected in 1928, when Al Smith, the previous governor, ran for president as the Democratic candidate. Roosevelt initiated the first state home relief program in the country. I believe other states followed. I'm not sure about that. But as a result of that home relief program, and then later in the 30s, public assistance, a federal program, from Washington covering the nation, we were never hungry, never homeless, never cold. And that's quite something, and that made me, of course, a fan of public assistance and demonstrated very vividly how government could help poor people, middle-class people later, too, but could help poor people. It was so dramatic. And the Irish like to say they were never on relief, but of course, they were on relief. We all were. And we lived in a neighborhood where most people, I believe, were, on relief. Though we are not poor today, and I became a lawyer, I have not been poor for decades. Of course, I identify very strongly with the struggle of poor people. It was an awful sight, and I think struck fear in all of us. And from time to time, you would see the furniture, the meager furniture, parts of a bed, a bureau, on the sidewalk. And what it meant is that they had been evicted from their apartment. And it struck fear because you knew that you could be next. I think what we had, though, for some reason, I'm not altogether sure, we had hope for the future. We had hope for the future. Now, the basis for that is a bit of a mystery, to me. A famous war correspondent, Floyd Gibbons, I think he may have been famous in World War I, and he had a radio program that dramatized the winners of contests that he gave. People would write in their stories. So my mother wrote, my mother and father, I think it was more my mother, wrote up my father's story, and it won the contest, and won $500, which was all this money. But I remember that. It was around 35. I remember listening, it was so strange. My father, because after they over-dramatized it, of course, but he introduced my father. My father's on the radio. And if it was 3 to 5, I'm maybe 3 years old. That was, so I writing about it, yeah. Yeah, because that revolt was very dangerous, to the British because it's such bad example for the Indians. And Gandhi was back from South Africa. And the Congress Party was starting to agitate, of course, So it was the worst kind of example, very threatening, to the British. And, But later, probably in the 60s or 70s, my oldest niece was getting married. She introduced her groom to my father, and he immediately began to recommend and talk about Malcolm X's autobiography. And the guy was stunned. And I wasn't sure about the story, but I happened to meet him because his daughter was the center of the wedding celebration last September. So Tony was there, and and the story's correct. He said he was very surprised. He meets this old guy, old Irish guy, who immediately recommends the book, tells me he has to read the book. Yeah.
So your father liked the book?
Yeah, he loved it, yeah. Because it's about rebellion, that's what it's about. Rebellion against, the culture, the oppression, right? And of course, the black subordination, demonizing, victimization of blacks, And there was an Irish version of that, the Irish ideal was a rebellion every generation. They didn't quite meet that standard, but there were enough. And my father's rebellion of that Irish regiment, in the British Army was, an example of it too. They got these letters from home about the black and tans, a lot of atrocities committed. So that triggered the revolt. The contradiction of being an Irish regiment in the British Army at a time when, these black and tans were wreaking havoc, upon, their families, in Ireland. What I did, I went to school Monday to Friday, and then Saturday I would go down to Times Square. I see this way of contributing, and there was a Pepsi Cola canteen. If you were in uniform, any uniform, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, you could get a free Pepsi. I never got inside, of course. I was 9, 10, 11. And my shine shoes were outside, and it was the GIs, And see, I remember them as big and old, but when you see the pictures, they were 18, 19, 20, 21. But I remember, they were very good too. It was just a nickel for a shine, but they would always give me a quarter, So I could make $5, $6, $7, and I would give most of it to my mother, save 5 or 10 cents. And you could buy a piece of chocolate for a penny, But that way it was the first money, I could contribute, to the family. And we're on welfare, so, for $5 you could get, a couple of bags of groceries maybe, I had a pretty good job then. I was 12, delivering flowers for Irene Hayes, an upscale florist on Park Avenue. Getting 50 cents an hour. I got the minimum wage. 50 cents an hour, plus tips, cops stopped me once down there. It was some holiday morning. I said, what the hell are you doing here? He obviously knew I didn't belong here. I was going to Irene Hayes, let me go. But I remember about that experience is these GIs, they had a very serious look, I mean, they were on the way to Europe or the Pacific, I mean, some of them did not return, Well, what happened is the last step in getting your working papers, I got, they look at my forged birth certificate. They didn't care. They let me go ahead. But the last step, I looked. They had the Department of Health birth books. Yeah, they were checking against the births. I knew I was caught, so I just walked off the line. I never got them. But then they didn't. At Irene Hayes, the Forest, they didn't ask me. They just forgot to ask me until the end of the summer. And then they asked me. I always despised this colonial claim we're superior, to these inferior people. Like the French said, in Vietnam. I think human beings can be advanced or not so advanced. It's not surprising that groups are more advanced at a particular time. The Austrians have the great musicians, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, I love French painting, right? Sure. But the notion that some people are innately superior to others and should rule them, it's so goddamnably offensive.
But you were a ranger.
I joined the ROTC in college to avoid getting drafted in the Korean War. I was no militarist. And I was lucky because I got a commission when I graduated in 1954. But the Korean War ended in 1953. And then I'm in the Army until 1957. And in 1958, Eisenhower begins to send advisors to Vietnam. So I missed that too. It's just sheer luck. Now the Rangers, that was voluntary because that was like a challenge. Could I actually do this? And I guess what it demonstrated, you could do more than what you think. And the Army in peacetime is just all training. And some of it is fun. I learned how to rappel down a mountain cliff. All your life your mother tells you, stay away from the edge. Here you go over the edge. I guess the most famous is the march, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where then I guess there's the National Guard, maybe local police, state troopers, just attack these peaceful marchers. John Lewis was one of them. He felt like he was dying, he wrote later. It was so badly, they broke his skull. It took him months, to recover. He had spoken in 1963 too at the March on Washington. He was a young radical. He was 23 years old. And the organizers wanted the local Catholic cardinal to do the benediction. And the cardinal wanted to know what John Lewis was going to say. The young radical, oh God, in retrospect, it's nothing at all. But Martin Luther King was the 15th speaker that day. Can you imagine? That was a hot, muggy day in Washington, August 28th. But when he began to speak, people were exhausted, from the heat, and 14 speeches. But when he began to speak about, I have a dream, that language electrified the crowd. And it was, it was a great feeling of solidarity, of hope, It was black and white, a lot of people all over the country. It was 250,000 people. That was very stirring. But that was 1963. In 1965, when I responded to Dr. King's appeal that people go down. I went down with a friend, a young lawyer, I can't even remember his name. And you would go, to the, you would go to this local Baptist church, black church in Selma. And Martin Luther King, who wasn't actually preaching, what he was doing was welcoming people who came. He would say, who are you and where you're from? So these 6 guys walk in, And he asked them, and they say, we're 6 atheist Jewish psychiatrists from Boston. And he immediately says, God welcomes you. You know. And then there weren't so many people, but actually people came throughout the night, you know. So by the morning, you know, there were some thousands of people, you know, from throughout the country. And then you're assigned to a family. We stayed with an elderly black couple. And the next morning, the man, this old guy, says to me, look, there was a big crowd there at the assembly point. You stay here with the main group. The soldiers will protect you. You wander off, they'll kill you. I told him I wasn't doing any wandering that day. It finally ended, I don't know, 10 or 11, you know, people coming in. Yeah, he was standing there, you know, by the lectern. So I went up, you know, and I, you know, just, so I felt like I met him for a few minutes. There was some, I forget, you know, something, actually what we talked about, a couple other people were there. So I say, I always say I met Martin Luther King briefly. I had been out in Cincinnati. There was some work I was doing. And I go back to the airport, and I see Malcolm. I see Malcolm X standing there. I recognize him. And, you know, I don't usually approach people. I don't do that, but I wasn't going to let this opportunity go by. So I go up to him. I say, are you Malcolm X? He says, yeah. And luckily for me, the plane, there was a couple hours late, the plane. Then more than that, it was actually 5 hours altogether. Because the plane was very late, and then the flight, it was a propeller plane, I think. So the flight might have been at least an hour and a half or 2 hours, you know, from Cincinnati. And I mostly listened, you know. And he was wonderful, because I guess he sensed something about me, you know, that I really... I see, at that time, he had been to Mecca, and he had seen Muslims, blonde Muslims, yeah, Muslims with red hair, yeah. And it did change him, because he realized, you know, Muslims could be of all backgrounds, you know, and that these white Muslims were, you know, friends, you know. And so he was beginning to organize an interracial movement. And maybe, you know, he saw that potential in me, and he talked at length about the theme was that the black community had to help itself and rise up by itself. And nobody could do it for them, you know. Nobody could do it for them. And actually that's what, you know, the black Muslims have done. Like a lot of small businesses, cafes, small shops of different kinds. Yeah. You know what's interesting there? Vance, the author of Hillbilly Elegy, yeah, it's a book about growing up in down-and-out communities in Kentucky. He says about the down-and-out communities, the government can help at the fringe, at the edge, but the people there have to, you know, do it themselves. You know, it was very, you know, very close, you know, to Malcolm X. Yeah, but those communities, he said, they don't have hope, you know. In the South Bronx, we had hope, yeah.